everyone, welcome back. I am so sorry for taking so long to get this video up, but a lot of stuff happened. But to make a long story short, I had everything done for both Ul'dah and for Hydaelyn, ready to go, and then something happened with my laptop that ended up erasing all that hard work, and I was so crushed I could not bring myself to do another set because it was beautiful when I was done with that first one. So I decided to take a bit of an extended break from my little lore series. But the good news is I am feeling back to normal, like I'm up to trying again, making it even better than before. So we are going to be picking up where we left off from last time. If you remember the series that we've done so far, we already went ahead and covered the history of both Limsa Lominsa and Lenocia, all the lands within Hildebrand we had done. And now that we're done there, we are moving officially onto Aldenard, which is going to be covering both places such as Gridania, Ul'dah, Ishgard, the Durranian hinterlands and all the lands there, as well as Ghe Hourglass. And I'm probably going to be missing some other places, but for right now, we're going to be continuing on with our series by covering the next of the 3 city-states that we already have so much history about. And in this case, we're going to be moving straight on to Ul'dah. So sit back and please enjoy the show. Okay, everyone, so moving on, like I said, straight on to Ul'dah. Amidst the arid deserts of southern Aldenard stands Ul'dah, a bustling commercial hub and ruler of the regions of Hydaelyn. The city rises suddenly from the mom upon mom of dusty wastes, protected from the blowing sands by the embrace of the stalwart fortress. So here we are in Ul'dah. So we're just going to be doing like what we did before. We're just going to go over a very brief history about Ul'dah, what makes it so unique and special, and then going over the current ruler, or I guess in this case rulers, as well as how their government works, their grand company, and anything else that we need to know about Ul'dah. So, as for Ul'dah's flag bears upon the field of black a set of golden scales, which weigh the jewel of prosperity on the left and the flames of might on the right. This emblem itself originates in Belhadia, where the scale weighed power and wisdom. Thus, the twin heirs to this ancient civilization took one signal apiece: Ul'dah the flame, and Sildith the grapes of knowledge. The motto here is for coin and country, and the government of Ul'dah is the members of the Ul dynasty. Now they claim sovereignty by right of birth. Their will is carried out by the Divan, a group of 8 advisors who oversee matters of law, finances, engineering and interior commerce, wars, religious affairs, and palace affairs. However, the influence of sultanas has been waning for some time, and at present true power is wielded by the Syndicate, a power set by 6 of Ul'dah's most elite and influential. So while it is technically the Syndicate who's really in charge, the official leader of the entire nation of Ul'dah is none other than Sultana Nanamo Ul Namo, 17th in the line of Ul. So her ancestor was the original ruler, like the first ruler upon the Ul dynasty, and she's the 17th heir, so she's the great-great-great-granddaughter 7 times removed. However, the ruling body is a sultanate, which we have several different officers who technically are kind of like a joint project. So basically we have about 8 of them all together, including the Sultana, and all rights, like anything major happening to the city, has to be decided by at least a majority vote between the 8 of them. Though, of course, these days there's going to be a couple less members just based on things that have happened recently. As for the different guilds that we have here in the city, this city is home to guilds representing the gladiators, pugilists, thaumaturgists, goldsmiths, weavers, alchemists, and miners. So out of all 3 city-states, they are probably the ones that have the most, if not the most, of when it comes to at least the crafting arts. They have several crafting arts, and probably that's might be one of the reasons why it's so prosperous in this little city in the desert. Now, as for several industries that go on inside the city, probably the main one would be merchants. Now, the reason the city is so prosperous, at least one of the reasons, is that it's a gateway to the 5 seas and roads to all corners of the realm. Ul'dah has long since flourished in the center of commerce, and today countless companies, both large and small, operate within the city-states. It's also well known for mining. Beneath the sands of Hydaelyn runs countless veins of quality ore, and as a result, a bustling jewelry trade has evolved. Textiles as well, in addition to crafting essential fabrics for everyday use, a large and prestigious apparel industry has grown under the auspices of an increasing number of wealthy people. As represented by the sun-silk tapestries, a number of notable brands have become popular even outside of Ul'dah's borders. And also, it's home to many different practitioners of medicine. So thanks to the tireless sundry of ailments at Fronsdale's Promontory, Ul'dah has established itself as a reputable producer of alchemic and traditional cures. And I suppose if you really want to count it as an industry in and of itself, we have entertainment. The city-state offers something for seekers of pleasure, from gladiatorial displays in the Colosseum, gambling at the Platinum Mirage, and games of fortune at the Manderville Gold Saucer. And it's not really uncommon to see beautiful dancing girls in the streets performing for the masses at large. Now, as for the beliefs, or I guess the religions that we have here in the city, the guardian deity of Ul'dah is none other than Nal'thal. So Nal'thal is the overseer of the underworld and the god of commerce. While many believe that he is possessed of a dual nature, Ul'dah see him more as twins, and they worship Nald and Thal separately. Since times of eld, the Order of Nal'thal has devoted itself to this task and encouraged the devout to donate their coin for virtue in this life and happiness in Thal's realms in the next. Now, in a city of merchants, everything has a price, and businesses is placed upon high hallowed pedestal. Shopkeepers now scant mercy towards their rivals, and anyone who is cheated out of coin is seen not as a victim, but rather as a fool. To other Eorzeans, inhabitants of the city-states may seem as swindlers who worship nothing but profit. Nevertheless, the core of Ul'dah's value of hard work and daring seems to have earned many men great fortunes in their lifetimes. Now, since we are also in the middle of the desert, unlike with Limsa Lominsa's Bounty of the Sea, where they have so many gourmet fish and sea life to kind of keep them sustained, in the desert, very few vegetables grow in the heat of Thanalan, leaving Ul'dah's cuisine to consist largely of meats and insects, heavily seasoned with imported and local spices, though some claim that merely concerts fares that would normally be deemed unfit for consumption. Alcohol, on the other hand, is more highly appraised, as the arts of the Alchemist Guild have led the distilling techniques leading to liqueurs and complex and subtle flavors. So that there is just a very basic, brief history of what we know about Ul'dah already, just kind of what you can be expecting as a real introduction to the city itself. Now, let's just talk real quick about their grand companies and a little bit of their organizations. Now, since there are so many different organizations that we have here in the city-state already, so this is really just going to be mostly talking about the Immortal Flames, which is their grand company. Now, the initial impetus to restructure Ul'dah's armed forces came from Ralban al-Din, who was rooted in his loyalty to the Sultanate, something not really shared by his fellow members of the Syndicate. As a bulk of Ul'dah's military strength come from their host of mercenaries and now dwindling contingents of palace guards known as the Sultan Sworn, Ralban proposed a standing army to bring under their ranks and oversee additional wartime training. Ultimately, this was what helped to booster Ul'dah's overall might, and after tense consultations with the Syndicate, the Sultana ordered that this grand company be established. Now, for Ralban himself, he was born in just a small, destitute hamlet deep within Ghe Hourglass, and did much to defend his nation's borders from Garlean's attack. When the Highlander was 25 years old, however, his nation fell. Ralban escaped with little more than his life and spent 2 years as a vagabond before coming to Ul'dah. There, he was mistaken for an imperial spy and immediately imprisoned. For many years afterwards, Ralban fought as a gladiator upon the blood sands of the Colosseum. Wielding the ancient blade dancing techniques of Ghe Hourglass, he won his freedom, and this people love, as well as the popular title as the Bull of Alamigo. By the time he was 37, he had won 1,000 matches, and with his winnings he purchased the Colosseum itself, and by doing so earned himself a place among the Syndicate. Now at 44 years of age, some wonder if his hardest battles lie ahead of him as the only member loyal to the Sultanate. And as for his weapons of choice, he has a pair of twin blades, one of whom he ended up bestowing upon his adopted son Pippin. But he once wielded 2 cursed blades, and these were taken in the hands of former rivals in the Colosseum. With a name that roughly translates to Sword of Flames, its accursed magics are so powerful that the weapon will set ablaze all who cannot control it. Now, as for Pippin Tarpin, he was born to a drunkard of a father who traded him in to the Colosseum to help pay off his debts. While he was there, he became acquainted with Ralbon, who used some of his own money to pay off his father's debts and allow Pippin to leave the Colosseum. However, realizing that he would likely be sold again should he be returned home to his father, he returned to the Colosseum and begged Ralbon to train him as a gladiator. Touched by the boy's desire to seize his own future, the Alamegan found a lawful means to adopt Pippin as his own. Under his care, Pippin went on to face great success as a mercenary and involved in the establishment of the Immortal Flames. Eventually, he came to serve in the Bloodsworn directly beneath his adopted father. Though deadly serious in the line of battle, Pippin does enjoy a healthy tip of good Udal spirits each evening. The stronger the better. So it was Ralbon who started the Immortal Flames, and he eventually would end up passing that duty on to leading the Immortal Flames to his adopted son, as well as one of his twin blades. Now, as for the Immortal Flames, believe it or not, the Immortal Flames that we know in the game were not the original Immortal Flames of Ul'dah. They were originally an organization that was started during the Thorn Dynasty. Unlike the Sultansworn, who were charged with protecting the Sultan and palace, the Immortal Flames were once an elite force created to ensure Udal's victory on the battlefield. Their fighting spirit was legendary, and many more were the songs that spoke of them as valorous crusaders who felled the zombies within Sildith's walls. Though the Thorn Dynasty disbanded the Immortal Flames, Udals continued to see them as heroes who contributed to the prosperity of the nation. In fact, it is widely thought that Ralbon chose the name for his new grand company precisely because it would stoke the flames of Udal's patronism, and therefore aid in making the organizations a reality. As for the characteristics of the Immortal Flames of today, presently the Immortal Flames are known as the central force within the Eorzean Alliance, but are fewer than the Maelstrom or the Order of the Twin Atom. Indeed, the main force is comprised of 3 main brigades of only 236 men apiece, though this does not take into account the Bloodsworn, who directly serve Flame General Ralbon, leader of the Immortal Flames, or former leader in this case. Yet they are no lesser for their number. The main brigades lead the sellsword bands of the Brass Blades and Stone Torches in training, and their efforts have produced an armed force that is second to none. The foreign brigades, another feature of the Immortal Flames, are units created as Ralbon's behest. As a means at strengthening Udal's forces, his choice to hire soldiers from among the Alamegan refugees has proven to be of some merit. The move, however, has also made wary the Monetarists, ruling faction within the syndicates, who worry about granting more authority to the Sultana and her advisors. So this diagram here shows us very briefly about how things are run. We have the Flame General at the top, and we have both the Hall of Flames and the Bloodsworn underneath him. Now, underneath the Hall of Flames, they have the potential to ask any one of these 3 other organizations for aid. We have the Stone Torches, the Sultansworn, and the Brass Blades. Also underneath the Immortal Flames, we have the 1st to 3rd main brigades. And they can pretty much serve both the Brass Blades and ask for help whenever you want to, as well as the Foreign Brigades, the Alamegan Brigade, and the Free Brigade. So basically there's a lot of different factions here. The main forces, of course, are the Immortal Flames, or the Hall of Flames. And they are the ones who primarily take hold of everything. They're the largest force within these organizations, basically, but because they are still considered a smaller number compared to other nations like Limsa or Gridania, they still have to ask for help like every occasionally, especially when it comes to matters like at what happened with Cartano or Operation Archon. As for the other organizations that we have here in Udal, we have the Ul Dynasty. Now, the Ul line is descended from Sasagan Ul Sishigan, the first of his name and founder of Udal. Since their right to rule was restored by the Thorn family, the second Ul dynasty was reinstated uninterrupted. At present, Sultana Nanamo Ul Nanmo, the only daughter of Sashabal Ul Sisabar and Nanasha Ul Shasha, wears the crown. She is a direct descendant of the original leader and the 17th of his line. However, she was forced to take over the throne at a very young age, and at present, compared to what many people would believe, it's really the Sultanate who has a majority of the power. She has just a very small voice in comparison. Now, Nanamol came to power at the tender age of 5 when her father passed. Naturally, none so young could fathom the intricacies of government, and so the Sultana was really nothing more than a puppet at the time. Despite having ruled for more than a decade and a half, to this day many dare to accuse her of being little more than a mammoth mouthing the Syndicate's words. She is not, however, without her allies. At the age of 9, she surprised the city-state by pardoning Ralbon Ardin on a whim. As his Colosseum winnings were conferred upon him, the Bull of Alamigo swore an undying oath to serve as the Sultana's sword. When he joined the syndicates, Reborn made good on his promise and remains entirely loyal to Nanamo. Though she is the picture of prosperity when sitting the throne, Nanamo is still a maiden of 21 years, and has a more playful side. She is known to leave the palace incognito and take tea and crumpets at the quicksand. So while she is technically the ruler of Ul'dah, again, she doesn't really have too much power and can't really do whatever she wants. At least not without permission from the syndicate. Now, the syndicate itself is comprised of the wealthiest people of Ul'dah. Though they initially served in an adversary role, at present they are more of the nation's ruling body. The Monitarists, the reigning faction, works to establish self-governance, though Reborn acts as a foil to their attempts. Nevertheless, the Sultana's options carry little weight. Given the range of power afforded to the syndicate, their struggle over membership haven't always been fierce. There's also the Sultan's Sworn, who are the personal guard of the Sultana. They were formed in 969 by the decree of Sanagen ul-Sheshagen. Originally consisting of paladins who helped to found Ul'dah. They have remained loyal defenders to the royal line for 500 years, even through changes in dynasty. While their fealty currently remains with the Sultana, the Monitarists have managed to cut the organization's strength in half to what it was in their glory days. Thus, the Sultan's Sworn must now accept the aid of the Brass Blades even in the guarding the royal palace, and their morale has suffered much for it. The loss of Oathkeeper, the blade of Sheshagen bequeathed to the first Sultan's Sworn captain, has been partially lingering and deterrent effect upon their power. Though if you have played through the game, then you know exactly what happened with Oathkeeper and that it is returned eventually. Spoilers there. We also have the Brass Blades and the Stone Torches, each who serve different parts of Ul'dah as well. And we also have several other different organizations who, again, I will be talking more about those in maybe another video, just because there are so many. Now, let's go on straight here to a tour of Ul'dah itself. So this is just going to be a quick tour of all the major, I guess, landmarks or special spots here we have in the city, followed by a quick and rather brief history about Ul'dah before I think we can wrap it up from there. So let's start here upon the steps of Nald. Now, out of all three city-states, Ul'dah is probably the biggest, so Ul'dah actually has several maps in order to get the whole picture. So we'll just start here at the Gate of Nald. One of the three main portals assembled by the general populace, the Gate of Nald is wide enough for 2 fully burdened chocobo carriages and still leave room for the flanking gate guards. Her Royal Majesty Nanamo Unamo has commanded that the portcullis remain open night and day, so as to all welcome to who would partake in Ul'dah's wonders. Next up, we have the Hourglass. Now, the Hourglass is the foremost inn on the Merchant Strip. Situated next to the busy thoroughway and boasting the best in service, it serves as a home away from home to countless repeated customers who would never dream of staying anywhere else in Ul'dah. Now, this is also attached to the Quicksand, which is the Adventurers Guild. From traveling merchants to pilgrims, this tavern within the Hourglass bustles with all manner of clientele. One may also readily see adventurers aplenty, as the place is also home to their guild, like I said. So this is, in actuality, the main inn that you would be staying in Ul'dah, especially if you are an adventurer. Next up, we have the Ruby Road Exchange, one of the 2 main markets in Ul'dah. The Ruby Road Exchange is famous for its dancing girls, which it employs in great numbers. With a display of twirling bodies, merchants hope to entice their customers and drive them into a buying frenzy. Which is smart if you ask me, especially since how many guys you see hanging about here. Next up are the Sunsilk Tapestries. Sunsilk Tapestries is a famed shop dealing in the highest of fashion. Indeed, many of Eorzean's most popular trends begin and end in this studio, which also oversees the production of more monetary price attire sold elsewhere, as well as the uniforms worn by Ul'dah's military. Next up, we have the Emerald Avenue. Now, this is actually a place you kind of have to be watchful whenever you come to the city. It's near the Aetheryte Plaza, and it's the chosen haunts of adventurers and merchants in the know come to the area seeking the information that they peddle. This is also where you can find Waimon, who is the seller of secrets. So basically, you sell him a secret, he'll be happy to tell you whatever you want to know. Moving on to the Platinum Mirage, one of the 2 Ul'dah's entertainment halls. The Platinum Mirage allows through its doors only that whose coffers are of a prodigious weight. Wards to protect against magical championship can be purchased at the city's so-called Oasis of Fortune, as can the protective services of pugilists. So this here is on the other side of the Pugilists Guild, which you can actually go into whenever you want to, but basically the end is really for the rich and the famous, those who have more money than sense. And not only can you go there to ensure some privacy while living in wealth, you can still go next door and speak with a pugilist and see if you can hire any who can take care of any, shall we say, problems that you may have. Alright, moving on to directly across the street, we have the Hall of Flames. The Hall of Flames serves as the headquarters to the city-state's grand company, the Immortal Flames. It was built over Old Topaz Lane in an effort to restore an unused part of the city that had, until recently, become overrun with unsavory types. Ooh, already not really a good idea. So basically taking out the old and replacing it with the new. After that, we have the Gate of the Sultana. Though erected in commemoration of Nanamo Unanamo's reign, both the demand and funding to build it came from the city-state's merchants and monetarists who were vexed at seeing passage to the city made nigh impossible by throngs of calamity refugees. Thus the Gate of the Sultana was constructed as a back entrance for the city guard, and now serves as a third egress from Ul'dah. So the reason that this whole gate exists is basically because there were so many refugees after the calamity that they basically were blocking the doors from anyone entering and exiting, so they decided to just build a second one just to make it easier. Which is actually a smart move now that I think of it, because you have people coming and going all the time with no traffic. There's also the Rootless. The Rootless is a weapon shop that once specialized in arming those who fight in the Colosseum. However, when rumors swirled of an impending Amaja attack, the proprietors seized the chance to peddle their goods to the townsfolk as well. To this day, all employees are retired gladiators with an intimate knowledge of arms and armor. Wow, that actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you're going to sell weapons and armor, who better than to have those who wielded those on a daily basis sell them for you? Very ingenious. And finally, the last part that we'll talk about upon this patch here is known as the Ossuary. Now, one of many temples under the care of the Order of Nal-Thal, the Azareth Seth Ossuary is devoted to the worship of Thal, the divine arbiter of the afterlife. Two kinds of people visit its halls: the destitute praying for fortune in the realm of the dead, and the money-seeking extravagant funerary rites, which is why attached to it is Irreleg's burial chamber. Built within the remains of ancient ruins dating far below Ul'dah's foundation, Irreleg's burial chamber is a crypt open to all Udans, provided they make donations to the temple. The prestigious lower levels of the chamber are reserved for those who have given very generously. Small contributions merits entombment in the top levels, while penance reportedly lands corpses in the wilds where monsters roam. Wow, so basically if you don't end up donating to the church, or if you donate too little, they just end up throwing your corpse out to the wild animals to be devoured. Wow, that's harsh. Alright, so now we are moving on to the next section, which are the Steps of Thal, which, as you can see here from the map, it's almost like one great big circle, because it doesn't matter which way you turn, you will eventually find your way to the location you're supposed to get to. And we'll talk about the second part of the Steps of Thal in just a moment. So the first one is the Gate of Thal. One of Udon's main entrances, the Gate of Thal honors the patron deity of the city. Caravans often pass through its doors, delivering goods to the Sapphire Avenue Exchange. Speaking of which, the Sapphire Avenue Exchange, this marketplace is responsible for Ul'dah's fame as the city of merchants. The wares sold here are said to come not just from Eorzea, but from the northern and southern seas, and even from the lands to the east. Meanwhile, we have Pearl Lane. Pearl Lane is lined with the shuttered offices and storerooms of traders who do business in the Sapphire Avenue Exchange. Due to the many refugees who work as porters, this area is known as one of the more dangerous parts of the city, though this reputation itself may be suspect. Moving up here, we have the Milvanth Sacrosum. This here is known as the Sacred Temple of Nald. In recent past, it was visited by many devoted followers, and the majority of whom were merchants praying for wealth in this life and success in their endeavors. Now, only a chosen few are allowed to actually enter its halls at will, as the temple undergoes repair from the calamity. So the damages done to this temple were so bad that even to this day they're still working on the rebuilding of it. Next up we have the Gold Court. It's a large atrium in the heart of Ul'dah. The Gold Court occupants and scale make it a popular meeting place for the city's elite. The plaza was once reserved for the Sultan's private balls, but has since been opened to the public due to the lack of funds to maintain the majestic hanging fountain at her center. So whenever you enter the steps of Nald, you will eventually pass through this magnificent fountain. And like I said, it really was open to just the elite at first, but eventually it just was open to the public, and so anyone who wants to can see it whenever they want. Moving up here, we have Onyx Lane. Onyx Lane is aptly named as it leads to the main offices of Amiga & Sons and the Miners Guild. Accordingly, a number of bemuscled miners can always be found close by. So you often see miners around this area. It's really not too spectacular compared to all the other avenues. It's probably the smallest one that we've got. Speaking of which, the Amiga & Sons Mineral Concern is where Mistress Amiga and the proprietress of the tavern founded the concern during the Mad Mithril Rush some century and a half ago. At present, the company controls the main mines in Thanalan and has grown large and wealthy enough to afford a standing force of sellswords known as the Stone Torches. So the Stone Torches are actually from the Amiga & Sons Mineral Company. They're really primarily loyal to Amiga & Sons, however they are known to help patrol the city and help out the citizens wherever they can as well, provided that they're not bought by some of the other more corrupted members of the city. Now moving back through here in this part of the city, we have S9's Aesthetics. Known throughout the realm for its jewelry, it carries everything from the newest and most fashionable of styles to classic pieces from ages past. This will also take commissions and craft whatever a client desires. Now, unlike a lot of the other guilds here, it's really more of a stall that's been set up here in like its own little private corner of the Steps of Nald. So that alone should tell you just how rich they particularly are, because they are only found in this particular part where you see mostly the wealthy and the elites. And adventurers can actually come and purchase things from this particular stall as well, for a price, like they say. Now let's move on to perhaps the main attraction that you have here in Ul'dah in the form of the Colosseum. In the Colosseum, spectators are driven to a frenzy by bloody competitions ranging from single combat betwixt gladiators to bouts pitting ill-equipped prisoners against terrifying beasts from exotic lands. Illegal gambling on the outcome of matches is a favorite Ul'dah pastime, as well as the city's worst-kept secret ever. So this is exactly what happened back with Raoban. He was stuck as a prisoner and thrown basically to wild beasts in the Colosseum, but eventually rose to a point that he won 1,000 matches single-handedly, and therefore with that mountain of prize money, he ended up buying the whole Colosseum. So it was actually thanks to Raoban's story that so many of the misplaced during the calamity, like the refugees, they take to trying their hand at the exact same thing. A literal rags to riches story. Now let's move upstairs real quick to the upper levels of the city. So this is still part of the Steps of Fall, but it's directly above the Golden Court and everything else. So it's a much smaller area, and this is a place where you see mainly like the richest of the rich kind of roaming about, as well as the Sultan's Sworn or the Sultana's private guard. So this first part is known as the Royal Promendae. During times when the Sultan had sole rule over the city-state, the Promendae would serve as an entourage waiting chamber for those petitioners who sought audience with his resplendence in the fragrant chamber. Now, however, with the power in the hands of the syndicates, the round is empty, save for the occasional treks between young nobles. So this was once a very popular place where just about anyone could meet back in the days where it was just the one leader, where they just had the Sultan kind of ruling over everyone. And I guess eventually over time, people didn't like the idea of their city being in just the hands of one person, and with enough money, I suppose you could buy yourself anywhere, and that's kind of where the syndicate arose. So with the syndicate mostly in power, with Nanamo really having just a very small, very tiny bit of power over them, this is really what happened. So yes, the Royal Prominence is supposed to be a main meeting place where visitors were allowed to speak with the Sultan. Not really so much anymore, so you don't really see people mingling about here aside from a couple noblemen once in a while. Next up, we have the Scholar's Walk. Now, this wide corridor leads to Frontdale's Monastery, the institution itself built upon property purchased from the Sultan's Sworn. It is not lost on those who tread these halls that a place once reserved for soldiers trained to kill and is now home to those studying the arts of healing, which I actually really do like. So you can actually see some traces of where the Sultan Sworn used to train and fight and basically learn how to kill people. Now, however, I'm guessing mostly with the Sultana's blessing that this is really a place where we have alchemists and healers and Chirurgeons learning different ways of healing, whereas in Gridania we have the conjurers who are able to heal by magic almost instantly. The alchemists prefer to rely more on medicines and concoctions to be able to cure wounds. And you can learn all about that from Frontdale's Monastery. Though Frontdale's Monastery began as means of training palace physicians, it has since grown to house 7 different faculties of medicine, ranging everything from the traditional to the alchemical and beyond. The Monastery also operates an infirmary, though the care it offers is a luxury only on the wealthiest can afford. What it sounds like is this place is really more for the rich, basically. So if you're poor and you're sick, you kind of have to either miraculously come up with all the gil to pay for their treatments, or you're kind of screwed. Hopefully, though, that will change. Alright everyone, so that's basically a quick tour of the main city-state of Ul'dah. So we visited all the major points, just all the places that I think deserved a little bit of recognition. The only real places that I did not talk too much about are really more of the guilds. So we do have several guilds here. I will be planning on talking more about the guilds in later videos. But that's basically just the major hotspots, like the major landmarks of the city. And now that the basic tour is over, I think it's now about time that we move on to just a brief history. We're moving on to the basic lore of the city of Ul'dah itself, how it came to be known as the Jewel of the Desert, and just what is its history that made it the nation it is today. Okay, so first off, let's start with the rise and fall of Beldea. Now, during the dawn of the 6th Astral Era, it saw a great suffering of magi. They had ruled the realm for an age, yet their arts had wrought great destruction, and many people demanded that magic be forbidden outright. Naturally, all those even remotely proficient in spellcraft faced some kind of prosecution. So I'm guessing that there was something of a witch hunt going on during those days. And to be honest, I can kind of understand where they're coming from, because it was really because of magic that the 6th Umbral Calamity happened and caused an apocalyptic flood that wiped out a lot of life and land and basically a lot of people in general. So I can understand why they would be so petrified about the idea of magic users. So anyone who even knew the slightest bit of magic was probably in danger of being prosecuted. Those few who used sorcery to protect themselves from the stones of fearful peasantry were often subjected to greater retribution. Which sucks, because they were just trying to defend themselves, and if they fought back, they were punished even more for it. Which left only one path to these mages. They were forced to flee and hide in the remote outskirts of civilization. After a while had passed, though, bitter memories became history, and history legend. After several centuries, men had forgotten their fear of magic and instead desired it anew as a means of military might. Thus, it was the Lalafellan heirs to the sorcerers of Mog, one of the civilizations of the 5th Astral Era, who eventually sought to reclaim their rightful place of magi. Banding together, they made for the wilds of Thanalan, and there they used the arts of their forefathers to find water flowing beneath the parched sands. What began as a well became a town and grew into the nation of Beldea by the year 737. Now, Beldean civilization flourished in relative peace for about 200 years, yet all of that was fit to change around the year 964, when the Sultan grew deathly ill and was confined to his sickbed. Now, as history undoubtedly tells us, when the king dies, or in this case the Sultan grows sick, responsibility for leading the nation falls to the eldest child. However, the big problem in this case was that the Sultan at the time had twin sons, in the names of Sasagen and Sasawifu. So of course, when you're dealing with twins, you kind of have to wonder which one of them would be the one rightful heir, who would be the one best able to lead the people through any kind of uncertainty. Well, what happened was the twins each called upon the soldiers loyal to them, and the nation was soon racked by war. The Sultan's death a year later did nothing to stem the fighting, and in the year 969 the princes decided that they would tear Beldea in half. Literally, that's what they did. they ended up building 2 new cities in Thanalan. We have Sildith under Sasawifu, and Ul'dah was built under Sasagen. Both twins ended up getting half of everything. One ended up getting one half of the city, the other ended up getting the other half, which probably didn't work very well like they were hoping for. I think that there were probably better ways that they could have solved that whole problem. I would have said take a vote or something personally, but well, that's just what happened. Yet despite all of that, it seemed that the two brothers were just not able to ever coincide. They were never able to make up, and basically that ended up influencing the two city-states for centuries after. No matter what anyone did, no matter how much time had passed, the two sibling city-states found reasons to want to fight each other. However, it was the actions of King Lalawifu of Sildith in 1159 that would ultimately doom the relationship. Instituting flood control to save the nation's alien economy, Lalawifu began to draw waters from the upper reaches of Udon's source. The move was popular in Sildith, and the people proclaimed their monarch the King of Springs. The Udons, however, hissed curses at him through parched lips. The stage then was set for war. So one of the two city-states was dying of thirst and basically stole water from Ul'dah. One city-state was flourishing with all the waters and springs, while Ul'dah was basically dying of thirst, which of course was what led to the inevitable war. In the year 1177, a drought came over Thanalan and King Lalawifu succumbed to illness. However, this misfortune spurred Ul'dah to action. Sildith's sibling nations seek to profit from the confusion. The following year, the city-states marched forth in full force to reclaim their water source. The Sildith elite, however, did not stand idly by. They united their nation in the face of the crisis and met Ul'dah with their own army. The resulting war was long and bloody, yet despite the countless summers of campaigns against one another, neither side could claim superiority, and the conflict showed little sign of drawing to an end. In the year 1181, however, Ul'dah found a means to break the stalemate, a powder devised by the thaumaturges that turned men's corpses into zombies. Having laid siege to Sildith, the Udons used their catapults to cast the substance upon the citizens within. So they created a magical powder to turn the people into zombies. Not really a smart idea because zombies are known to be notoriously difficult to kill because they keep coming back, but hey, what can you do? Long story short, it was said that what followed within the walls of Sildith during that day was a scene not amiss from the Seven Hells. The bodies of those fallen to starvation rose one by one and attacked their own countrymen. To explain the anguished screams to the rest of the people, Sashagen Ul'Shishigen, the third of his name and ruler of Ul'dah, proclaimed that Sildith had transformed their own dead to zombies in an attempt to win the war. Proclaiming it a sacred crusade to send these zombies to Thal, he ordered his immortal flames, the elite unit, into the city. Behind them followed a great host, and together they purged the waking dead. Thus Sildith fell. So yeah, on one hand, I understand why Ul'dah did what they did. Basically, their sibling nation stole all their water and their people were dying of thirst. Now, Sildith had no right to do that, and so I can't say that I disagree with Ul'dah going to war with them over that, but that was a dirty trick. He basically used dark magic to kind of turn the people into zombies, and then lied about it to the people, saying what was going on, and basically ordering the people to go ahead and kill everyone inside the walls. And so Sildith fell, and all that remains to this day are ruins. So yeah, that was dark. Very, very dark. Having brought an end to the Udal's troubles though, Sashagen Ul'Shishigen put the fell powder under close guard, and kept the truth of Sildith's end from the masses. Which of course he would do that if he didn't want to risk becoming unpopular. Now this silence held for 40 years until Baldrith Thorn, a Huon of noble blood, learned the truth and charged Sasagen for his crime. Startled, the aging ruler flew into a rage and demanded the offender's head. However, no one lifted a finger, let alone a weapon, for Baldrith was known as a righteous man. Sashagen was imprisoned and spent the rest of his days in the Marasaji pit. So in the end, while it did take a while, he ended up getting exactly what he deserved. He was punished for his crimes and locked away, and I'm guessing that his family was eventually shunned from the whole thing. Those around Baldrith then asked him to serve as Sultan. Though refusing at first, he eventually acquiesced on the condition that he would be a steward, ruling until the city-state was stable. The new Sultan never made knowledge of the powder public, for fear that it would fall into the wrong hands. Instead, he established the Arbiters of Truth, a group devoted to preserving the truth of Sildeth's downfall for the future. So again, I can understand why he did it, even if I don't necessarily agree with the methods. I personally think that he should have destroyed all of that powder, and maybe he thought that he was able to destroy it, and maybe just like a small portion of it did end up surviving. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think he would have wanted to give people ideas that this kind of dark magic existed. But man, what a guy! Like, he ends up overthrowing the old ruler, who may have been a tyrant given of how people were willing to stand against the current ruler for him. And then he decides that, no, I am not going to reign forever. I am just a steward for the throne. I will continue to rule the city until it's stable. So that's a really good guy right there. That's an amazing, that really is something else. So I really do like the idea of what Baldric did. And that was how the Thorn Dynasty came to rule. Now, the Thorn Dynasty ruled for 200 years after that and produced many ardent reformers. In the year 1270, one moved Ul'dah to almost directly above where her sister city-state had once stood. When undead rose from the ancient sprawling sewers of Sildeth in 1353, another enlisted the aid of the Amaja, Ul'dah's fiercest enemies. Given the Beastmen's belief that Thanalan is sacred, they eagerly joined the Udons to exterminate the impure presence. With this done, the Thorn heirs felt that their sworn duty had come to an end and returned rule to the Ul dynasty. So again, that really is one heck of a family. So this was also the family that ended up creating Little Ladies' Day later down the line. So they did what they felt was best to eradicate what was left of this so-called plague. And eventually, when they felt like their job was done, that there was no more threat with these zombies, they eventually turned the throne right back over to the line of Ul. Now, the Amaja threat notwithstanding, Ul'dah gained control of Thanalan through the raising of neighboring Sildeth. It was then that the city-state began to truly establish itself as a Miracided power, hiring sailors and purchasing Lominsan-wrought ships from as early as 1190. Soon, it was open trade with Ras-at Hand and the rest of the Near East. Behind this was the guiding hand of the Thorn Dynasty, who had restored the Udon's markets and overland trade routes after moving the city. And can you really imagine that? Like, moving an entire city, that would have taken so long. I hurt just thinking about it. It seems that where Ul'dah is standing today was basically where Sildeth was once stood, or at least the main rule of Sildeth from the looks of things. Yet that selfsame policy granted the merchant class greater power as their own coffers grew, while robbing the Sultanate of its influence in almost equal measure. Thus, in the year 1401, the distraught line of Ul established the Syndicate, a group of 6 advisors chosen as the merchants who had added the most to the wealth of Ul'dah. This group came to command the government and presently is the true power in the city-states. And eventually the lines continued on with the line of Ul until it ended up reaching Nanamo Nano. Now, Nanamo was still a young child when her parents were killed in some kind of an accident while they were out traveling the roads of Thanalan. It was said that a giant boulder came out of nowhere and destroyed the carriage, thus costing both of her parents' lives. It has been suggested on several occasions that this may not have been an accident. It seems much more likely that maybe someone within the Syndicate caused the deaths of her parents. We still have Nanamo, who is the last remaining heir to the throne of Ul'dah. And as a young child, she was going to be very easy to control, to manipulate. She was just a young child who was no more than 5 or 6 years old at the time. She was basically brought up to follow orders, told what to sign, just smile and nod and sit pretty on the throne. Now, since she was still just a little girl, she obviously had no idea what anything was really happening around her. But one good thing did come from that chapter in her life. For that was when she was making an official visit to the Colosseum and where she met Ralbon. Now apparently she had been invited to attend a match, and that was not at all what she was expecting. They had pitted the Bull of Alamigo against a dozen or so rival gladiators. And even though she was still young and really didn't understand too much of what was going on in the world at this time, she was obviously aware enough to know that what was happening was not fair, and she would not stand for it. She demanded to see a fair fight, one man against another, and as Sultana, her wish was granted. It wasn't until later on that she learned of the gambling ring that had been arranged for Ralbon to pretty much die on the sands that day. Regardless though, her intervention meant that Ralbon had but just one opponent to fight that day, and of course he won. When he knelt before the Sultana to receive the winner's purse, he swore that he would one day offer her his blade in service, in gratitude for basically saving his life. And that was the greatest wish she could have asked for. She was only 9 years old at the time, so she wasn't even 10 here. And that was something she needed. She needed somebody to help her, to help guide her through this difficult road. And what makes this extra important is that this was the first time she ended up speaking out on her own, with her own voice. Up until then, she was thrust into an endless parade of document signing and ceremonies of very little understanding of what was going on. But this was the first time she really spoke out, and she took all of her guards and advisors by complete surprise when she demanded that she see a one-on-one fight, before giving the ones in charge of the Colosseum a proper scolding for allowing such a thing to happen. Now, even at 9 though, she was starting to realize that she was surrounded by liars and manipulators, and so she kind of just dismissed what he said at first. But as I'm sure that everyone knows by now, Ralbon is a man of his word. Though it did take him another 5 years of fighting on the Blood Sands, he was able to amass his fortune as to not only win his freedom, but a seat on the Syndicate. And that was when Nanamo had her blade. But even before that day, she made a habit of those next 5 years to pay a visit to the Colosseum just to see Ralbon. He always had a kind word to say to her, and even then he ended up giving her a lot of advice that she treasured greatly. During that time, the two of them became really good friends, and it was a truly joyous occasion when he ended up standing there ready to face his final battle on the Blood Sands, which she did witness. Since that day, he had always been there by her side, always the first one to support and comfort her when she needed it most. She said so herself, that words cannot express just what he means to her. In a lot of ways, Ralbon was really the true leader of Ul'dah during this time. Nanamo wasn't a bad leader, so to speak. She was just inexperienced and just not ready to take the throne just yet. So that's why Ralbon played such an important role, because he was a natural born leader. He was the one who was really taking charge and protecting Nanamo and giving her all sorts of advice that she probably wouldn't have considered. And she treasures everything that he says. Now, while Nanamo knows that there are a lot of people who care about her, like Papashan, for example, who was once head of the Sultan's Sworn, and he loves Nanamo like he was her grandsire. But upon matters of governors, she can't really turn to her bodyguards or servants for counsel. Ralbon, on the other hand, had authority on the Syndicate. He was the first sword that she could wield. He was the only one who could really cut the strings that really controlled her. So when the time came for Ralbon to finally leave the city-state and return to Alamigo, I can imagine just how difficult it would be. That would have been a very difficult position for her. It would have been a very hard choice, because I see their relationship as like a father and daughter. Ralbon cares immensely about Nanamo, and he is going to be the first one to jump to her aid if she needs help. It's not really a kind of servant or bodyguard relationship. It's like a father and daughter relationship, and I firmly believe that. He loves Nanamo like his daughter, just like how he loves Pippin as his own son. So of course the two of them are not going to be able to see each other as often as they once did, but I know without a doubt that if Nanamo ever needed him, Ralbon's going to be the first one to go right back to Ul'dah and help her. Whether or not she is ready to stand on her own and really be the Sultana that Ul'dah needs in order to make it great again is yet to be seen. Anyway, everyone, that's it for now. That was a basic tour of both the city of Ul'dah as well as its basic history. What did you all think? Did you all enjoy it? Again, I know that it's taken a long time in order to get to this point. I apologize about that. But I do want to start doing these lore videos again. I do at least want to make sure that I get all of Hydaelyn done before patch 5.5 part 1 comes out. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do so, but we are going to do our best. So I hope that you're all going to be looking forward to it. Our next video is going to be talking more about the lands of Hydaelyn. I think we're going to be covering both central and western Hydaelyn to start off with. So until next time, everyone, thank you all so much for watching and have a great rest of your day. Bye!